everybody else in the AFL-CIO in Washington to make the saving of legal services for the poor, access to justice, a top labor priority. When Ronald Reagan left office, he did an exit interview with Time magazine, and he was asked what his 3 greatest legislative disappointments were. One of them was the failure to abolish legal services for the poor. The reason it exists today is essentially because of you guys. I moved here in '86. Chris was organizing Harvard, so I moved here. I came here in '86. About 6 minutes after I got here, I have no idea, I was in a prevailing wage commercial. I have no idea how that happened, so we won that one, and I'd like to claim thank you very much. And then in 1990, when Barbara Anderson from Citizens for Limited Taxation proposed the single largest percentage budget cut on the ballot in United States history, every single person on Beacon Hill said, it's unwinnable, forget about it, don't bother, it's just going to pass, we're going to have to deal with it. Labor put together a coalition that I was lucky enough to lead. We won that question 60 to 40, and essentially, what I'm trying to say is you deserve either the credit or the blame for who I am today, and so I guess I report and you decide. That's the bottom line. What I'm going to do, at the request of Tim and Bobby, I'm just going to go down quickly a list of some things that are happening in politics really quickly, and if at the end you want to ask a question or two, it's fine, and if you don't, I wouldn't blame you. 2 major decisions obviously were made on Beacon Hill today. One was to pick an interim senator, and the other one was whether or not to name the fluffernutter the sandwich of Massachusetts, which is a nifty proposition. I have to be candid, I don't want to put a damper on anything. Paul Kirk was not my first choice, not that it matters. Mike Dukakis, I thought, was the perfect man to be doing that. I was speaking to Tommy McIntyre. Everybody says there's no bigger fan of Ted Kennedy, and I want to say there's no bigger fan of Ted Kennedy. I have to be candid, I was not, I don't want this to be crass, I didn't care that much what his family thought about who should represent us in Massachusetts. And again, I don't mean that disrespectfully, but it's our seat now. And I have a problem, I must be candid, by having somebody serve 6 million people, I hear is a very good guy, when the vast majority of the 6 million people he will be representing never heard of him. And I think that's an issue. I hope he does well. I am convinced. I hope he'll be as loyal to the worldview of Ted Kennedy in death as he was in life. But as I say, Mike Dukakis was my first choice. So, having said that, let's dispose of this interim power thing, which is the most nauseating discussion I've ever heard in my life. Can you not listen for a second, please, representatives? Where the Democrats who switched their votes to support a point of power in the legislature hypocrites. Were they?
No.
Yes, they were. Were the Republicans who switched their vote when they were for a point of power before they against it, were they hypocrites? Yes. So it's a tie. That's all there is. It's a tie. It doesn't matter. Let me tell you something. If hypocrisy, Senator Donnelly can appreciate this, if hypocrisy was a bar to legislators enacting anything, there'd be no laws in this country. You just can't do that kind of thing. Was it the right... The fact that we had less representation, if the opponents of this interim thing had their way, that we would have less representation than the goobers in Alabama, and that's okay with it. My apologies to anybody from Alabama. It is an outrage. It is over. As you know, the Republicans are suing, saying that Duvall may have not had the power to appoint and declare an emergency. I don't know what the outcome of that's going to be, but you probably know that tomorrow at 3:15, Vice President Biden is swearing Paul Kirk in. And by the way, let me be clear, I hope he does great. I mean this sincerely. Obviously, I want him to do great. It just wasn't my first choice. Now, I mentioned the hypocrisy of 2004. While we're on it, did anybody hear Mitt Romney speak at the Value Voters Summit in Washington last week? Did anybody hear him? Okay, I will tell you what he said. He spent his whole speech railing against Obamacare. It's socialist, it's big government, it's going to ruin our economy. Now here's the question. What is Obamacare based upon? Romney and Kennedy care from a handful of years ago, which leads me to the conclusion that consistency is not one of the values that the value voters actually appreciate. Okay, special election. I'm not going to take sides. obviously the election, you know, December, January, know all the candidates come by, that kind of thing. How are you guided? How would I suggest? WWTD. What's that stand for? What would Ted do? I mean, I think that is the way one goes here. I will say, and I know I'm not alone, I've lobbied in Congress, I have lobbied on Beacon Hill, I have read a lot about both bodies. I am convinced, without a shadow of a doubt, the single greatest legislator who ever lived, ever, was Ted Kennedy. In I don't know what year it was, when I was part of the UAW, John Flynn, who some of you may have known, was the legislative director for Region 9A, then he went on to be the executive director, whatever it is, the regional director. John set up our first appointment. A bunch of lawyers, paralegals, and secretaries got on to Washington to lobby. Like, we had no idea what we're doing, but, you know, we're lawyers, so we, of course, know what we're doing. He sets up a meeting. Who is our first meeting with? Ted Kennedy. I'm telling you, Bobby and I have known each other for a while. Talking has never been a problem of mine. I was so scared sitting outside this guy's office thinking I was going to meet Ted Kennedy. I literally was hyperventilating. John Flynn was late, so all of us are sitting there. The secretary says, is he coming? Yeah, he's coming. Well, the senator says, just come on in. And we said, no, it's not this. Oh, yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, we go in there, and we're sitting in front of this icon who proceeds to lay out an agenda on how we are going to defeat Ronald Reagan's attempt to eliminate legal services for the poor. And I'm sitting there politely and listening, and it was just a huge treat, great storytelling. He doesn't know any of us, even though people from Greater Boston Legal Services, their union was there, a number of Massachusetts unions, but it was unbelievable. And we all leave saying, one of the greatest experiences of our life, but this is hopeless. The next day I'm walking down the hall, Ted Kennedy is walking arm in arm with the most reactionary, racist, right-wing dog, arm in arm, as he's walking down the hall, and I turned to one of my coworkers and I said, we won. And the brilliance of the greatest legislator of all time, and I saw it happen firsthand, is his view was outcomes are what matter. Meaning his need to serve poor and working people, not just in this state, in this country, nothing would stand in the way. And if he had to build liaisons with the Orrin Hatches and this guy from Texas I just mentioned, to achieve what he believed in, he would do it. And I'll tell you, one of the great tributes, I'm sure you heard this, right around the time of the funeral and the celebration of life the night before, did everybody hear what Dan Quayle, maybe the dumbest politician who has ever walked, did you hear what Dan Quayle, I'm serious, said about Kennedy? He said, I served with, I don't know, 130 people considering turnover. He said there was one man in the whole Congress who knew my 3 children's names. One man who would come up to me, and I don't know what his kids' names are, how's, you know, Florence or whatever it is. And Quayle, who, you know, I know you know this, but when Republicans run for office in Washington, they run against the Antichrist, which is how Ted Kennedy was viewed. And then all of a sudden they meet the Antichrist and realize he's what they want to grow up to be, even if they don't buy the ideology. And the lessons, what would Ted do, how would Ted be, or in my opinion is how we have to be guided as we go into this election. 2010, I know I don't have a lot of time, let me just do it briefly. The governor's race is obviously huge. I would not undersell, I think any of these, let's say 3.5 people, I don't mean that, I like Christy Miles a lot, I don't know if he has a real shot, but no, I'm serious. I wouldn't rule out Charlie Baker, Christy Miles is great on a lot of turnpike stuff, I wouldn't rule out Cahill, I surely wouldn't rule out Duvall despite his numbers. But rather than handicapping the race, let me say something I know you can relate to. I said it on the radio today for 2 hours. The question that should be asked of the candidates for governor is one that was answered by Deval Patrick in the last 24 hours. Are you going to be on the side of 98 people who were fired at a hotel in Boston at the same time, and I got the numbers right here, at the same time that their CEO, where the hell is it here, I'm sorry, at the same time that their CEO, here it is, his name is Mark Hoplamazian. At the same time that the CEO of the Hyatt company is making $6.7 million. Are you going to fight for those 98 people? If the answer is yes, they will have a right to be considered for our vote. If you're on the side of the 120 people at Boston Medical Center who lost their jobs, while we learned the other day the CEO got a $3.5 million KISS in addition to her $1.3 million salary. If you're going to be on their side, then in my opinion, you are entitled